So the InvisaGig has a new update, version 1.0.12, released in the month of September, and we're going to go over the new changes right now. So I'll go directly to a web browser. I'm connected currently directly to a PC, Windows 10 in this particular case, and I'm going to connect to the InvisaGig directly to make things simple. 192.168.225.1 for the InvisaGig IP address. This version is on 1.0.10. So first, of course, we need to make sure that we're connected to the internet. And we are. So now we'll log in with your password, and then look for InvisaGig update check. Depending on which version of the InvisaGig software you have, this option may be in a different place. For me, on 1.0.10, which if you have that same version, it should be the same, menu option 8. It will ask you, are you sure if you want to check for an update? And you can say yes if you like. It will check, and if online and it sees an update, it'll tell you there is one. Do you want to update to that? This is the last chance you get to decline the update. So we always want to make sure that you have the full option to choose for an update, even check for an update, but most importantly, to choose whether or not you want to update it. We do not have automatic updates. So in this case, I will say yes, and it will download the updated version and then apply it, and then reset the interface because it needs to launch the new version to be able to use it, obviously. So give it a few minutes at most. Usually it doesn't take very long, and then you'll press enter or return to reconnect. You'll also notice your InvisaGig might reconnect to the internet and or reboot itself a few times during this process. Give it enough time, it should come back fully, completely rebooted, and then you can log into it after that. All right, and now we're upgraded to version 1.0.12. So immediately you'll notice that there's a new option in here that says disconnect. This is a solid way to log out of the interface so that you release control to the InvisaGig interface. And this is here because you can also now remotely log into the InvisaGig using the Tailscale service, as well as if you have it somehow accidentally open in multiple web browsers on the network. It will actually now ask you, hey, this is in configuration session from some other IP somewhere. It's already active. Would you like to disconnect? And you can just say yes. And at that point, it's asking you to log in. You use your password to log into the InvisaGig like normal. And it will then give you control logged in. And the other unit or page will say, hey, it's been taken over. Would you like to disconnect that and take it back? Obviously, if you're two people are trying to log into it at the same time, you now will know that there's two people trying to log into it on your local network. So you should have control over that. You can say no, you may now close this window. If you've done that and said no, you can simply just reconnect to it to attempt again. Or just close the window altogether. All right, and so in this case, we are now logged in. If we want to, we can hit X to log off now, instead of trying to reload the page to go to the non-logged menu. You can actually log it off. It says you can close this window. If you want to reload it, hit enter or return or refresh the browser page. And we're back to the login. You still have access to your modem info page. You have access to the live signal here. Modem info page is going to have information that is private, like your IMEI number and your SIM ICC ID and stuff like that. Those will be marked out so that you can only read the last few digits so that you can see those numbers and should be able to verify at least that at a quick glance without showing off that information that is private without having to put in a password. So you have to authenticate to see that information. One, to log in, change the password when you get it, but whatever it is, make sure that you save it. Default password is on the paperwork and on the label of the InvisaGig. So the main menu is now changed. We've added more features and functions, and instead of continuing to expand the menu as this big, long, huge menu, we've combined some items into submenus. In doing so, we've also added a new header style that shows you where in the menu system you are. This can help you with navigation in some of the more nested menu systems where we have different functions that go deeper and deeper and go into multiple pages in a row, like our new configuration wizard or setup wizard. This can go through multiple pages, and this section at the top can tell you what you are. We also have a handy spot at the bottom that says having trouble. Documentation and support can be found at, and a link that is clickable to go to that support page. So as long as you're online, it'll take you to that page, which of course we have this page for contact, as well as forum where you can post anything you want about InvisaGig to get help or to brag about your speeds or anything else. Going back, the modem info page has actually been updated. So if we go into it, it'll now, instead of showing bits and pieces of it at a time, it'll give you this animation to tell you that it is working on loading the entire page at once. This page is scrollable. If there's lots of information, it will allow you to scroll up and down to see all of it. In my particular case, I have an AT&T SIM, which does not support currently standalone 5G. So the standalone bands aren't showing. So there's a little less info here, and it automatically disables the standalone for AT&T. You still get your IP address information, your local IP, which is the same as what you have here typically, tells you that it can reach the internet and highlights it for you now. Shows your IP pass-through or bridge mode MAC. We changed the verbiage on that to make it more understandable for more people. Firmware version, IMEI, serial number, carrier profile, as you have it set. Mine's set to auto select. We have a SIM slot now item that'll tell you which SIM slot you're using. For the current version, there's only going to be SIM slot 1. This is just work being put into the current version that will be the exact same software for both the current version of a single slot piece of hardware as well as our future dual slot piece of hardware. So you won't have any differences in your software overall. You'll just have only a physical 1 SIM slot or 2 SIM slots in the future when we do release that. This is the pre-work that we're doing for that to tell you all about that. Carrier, all this other stuff is the same, but we did a new thing in the network mode. So we say, or below the network mode, I should say, we tell you what the network mode is, the connection status, and then the primary cells section that tells you what you're currently connected to. We have homogenized this information to make it look the same across everywhere that this would get reported as best as possible to make it simple to look up on places like cellmapper.net and so forth. So we make it a little easier to read overall, highlight some of the pertinent things like blue for AT&T. We tell you the country and carrier code there, your signal strength, which is RSRP, signal quality, which is RSRQ. And then we also put in here your tower ID, cell ID, region LAC number, the frequency of the band that you're connected to, in this case 66, the PCI of that particular one, and then your upload bandwidth, 10 megahertz, and your download bandwidth, 10 megahertz on this particular cell that I'm connected to right now. And then below that, again, your currently enabled bands, the current time, reminder, that is in UTC time, not your local time. Make sure that you convert your local time to UTC time to understand what this time actually is saying for you, time and date. This unit has just been booted up. It says at the time of running this page, 4 minutes of uptime, and the modem temperature. Anytime there is a disconnect, a network change, or anything like that, it may disconnect the UI. You simply hit enter to reload and log back in. So the next update is on the live signal page. Remember that this live signal page uses a lot of resources. So if you want to check your speeds, make sure this page is not actively running. If you are running this page and you run a speed test, this page can take resources from the modem that would hinder potentially the overall throughput speeds of your modem, making it seem like it's slower than it actually can be. So turn off the live signal status page when running speed tests to ensure that you get closer to optimal reading of your actual speeds at the time of running that speed test to the servers that it's connecting to. So you'll notice a little bit of changes if you're not new to the InvisaGig. We've done a bit more highlighting on a few things. On your primary cells, who you're connected to. Of course, we tell you the band and the frequency. And then your signal power, which is RSRP, signal quality, RSRQ, and then the SINR, signal to noise ratio. These numbers will hop around a lot, especially as the modem is idle, like mine is. When the modem is idle, it is most likely to hop around and change connection types. My particular unit, again, is on AT&T, which uses 5G, but it only uses 5G as a secondary, and currently I'm not connected to any 5G cells. But it is aggregating LTE with 3 other cells in real time right now, and that is 66 as the primary, 212 and 66 as secondaries, shows the frequency and PCI of each of those bands. Now, if I open up something like speedtest.net while this is live, you'll see it'll come up, say that I'm on AT&T internet, and it'll choose some server that it thinks is optimal. I'll go ahead and start this speed test. Though I know it's not going to be the optimal speed test for my location, I'm just starting it. And you'll notice on this live page, the color changed. This is because those secondary cells are now active in the aggregation, and we're showing that to you. Looks like it actually dropped off at one of the bands, and it's utilizing this in different ways. So it's done with the speed test and the downlink, so it's going to drop some of this off while it does the uplink. So it's pretty neat. You can actually see not only your live signal, but your live aggregation combos and whether or not they're active or inactive at the moment in time that you're running these tests. Hit X to stop the live. In this particular case, if you hit X and you don't push enter to continue, you can see this snapshot of your signal and not lose any of this information for the moment until you hit the enter key. So then you can go back and you can run a speed test and say, okay, relatively speaking, now this test will give me a better idea of what the speeds are possible as it is currently set with the SIM card it's currently using. May or may not be better or worse, but in general, it will be more capable as long as this live signal is not running. Okay. Next, we have a connection configuration sub-menu. This is a grouping of settings. In this menu, we have network mode, local tower search, user profiles, carrier profiles, local IP and multiple modem setup, tail scale, and enabled bands. All of these we consider things that are relative to connection configurations, so we put them under a nested menu here. The network mode is straightforward. We've seen this before. It allows you to choose whether or not you want to force it to use LTE only or force it to use LTE plus 5G non-standalone and disable standalone, or force it to 5G standalone only or leave it in automatic mode. We've seen that before. There's nothing new there. The local tower search page has been updated, and we'll show a quick preview of this as well. Read the warnings whenever you do get a hold of yours. In this particular case, I've got LTE as my primary, so I want to do an LTE tower scan. Now that we see that we have the option for LTE scan or 5G standalone scan, 5G non-standalone is not possible to lock currently, only 5G standalone or LTE, either of which is a primary band. Secondary bands like 5G non-standalone do not get locked for the cell locks like this. We also have the option, again, to remove all tower bindings, view the tower binding log, and then back to connection and configurations or exit the menu altogether. I'm going to go with the LTE option, and it actually says here the current time as well as no scans executed yet. So on this InvisaGig, I've not yet committed any scans. If I had, and we'll see this in a bit, it'll show you those scans without having to rerun more scans. And you can utilize that to enter anything you want. If you know the information for this, you're an expert at this stuff, or you've done it before and you know what to enter manually, you can hit M for manual and enter manually. Otherwise, just hit enter and it will run the scan. You'll notice at the top, the menu breadcrumb tells us exactly where we are and what it's doing. So in this case, we went through the main menu to the connection configuration menu, into local tower search, LTE, and we're scanning. So now we have the output of my particular unit, and you can see the towers and the carriers that are around me, specifically the cells on those towers, and then the number associated with each of those bands. And again, like on our modem status page, a full output that is the exact same format as the one on the modem status page. So we keep this homogeneous to make it easier to read and find. And you can also use the tower ID, cell ID, and other information here to find this on applications like cellmapper.net. In my case, I have 4 Verizon bands, 3 T-Mobile bands, and 6 AT&T bands with overlap between normal AT&T and FirstNet. And you'll see here at the bottom as a note, search for local tower cells using cellmapper.net and opencellid.org. These are a clickable link that can take you to these websites. Okay, and then at the bottom, make a selection or press enter without a selection to start a new scan. So if I hit enter, it'll start a new scan. Or if I want to lock to, let's say, band 14 as a primary on AT&T, which I am on AT&T, I'll just hit 8 and enter. It'll ask me, are you sure you want to do this? This is the one you want to do. I can either go back and choose a different one. It'll show you the same ones. Say maybe 9 or something, but let's say I'd say 8. Yes, I want to. Then all I'll do is just hit enter. And this will reboot my unit and force this modem to connect to that specific LTE cell on that specific tower every single time it connects. So as long as that tower and that cell, that band, that specific cell of that band is available on that tower, all right, period, it will connect to that one first. Once the modem's done being rebooted, we can see on our modem info page that we have a bound LTE cell, band 14, and the information, and you'll see here that it is, in fact, my primary cell, AT&T. That's the one it's connected to, and we are online. Okay, now let's say I want to stop that from happening. Then we can go back into connection configuration, local tower search. Yes, I understand. And you'll see here now that, again, it shows that bound cell. I can go back into LTE. It will show me my last scan. If I want to rescan, I just simply hit enter here and it'll rescan. Otherwise, I don't have to rescan every time. I can go back and choose a different one on that list. So let's say I want to try number 9 this time. I can choose that. It'll say, are you sure? And you can go back, say yes, and exit. Or I can go back. I'm here. I want to do something different. Or go back again. New feature of our menu system. You can now move back through the menu steps. And let's say I want to view my tower binding log. It'll show you all the things that we've done for tower binding. Hit enter to go past that. And I can remove my tower bindings. And this is any and all. In LTE, you can set multiples if you do them manually, or if you do them with the menu, selecting after the scan, using a comma. In this case, I want to say yes, I want to proceed. It'll ask you if you want to or not, yes, no, or you can simply go back. I'm saying yes, I want to remove it. It's going to tell you the information of what's going to happen. Hit enter, and it will do that action. We'll wait for it to reboot up and move on. So back in the main menu, logged in, connection configuration, you'll see that we now have user profiles for menu option 3 here. User profiles are exactly what they sound like. A profile of your connection configuration, settings, everything for your InvisaGig can be saved as a profile. So as my unit is currently set, I can save that into a profile, and then I'll tell it I want to save it as test 1. And it'll ask you, this is what you entered. Are you sure? Yes, no, go back or exit. We say, yes, that's what I want. And it'll take all my connection configuration settings that I've set on this InvisaGig and save it in that profile named test 1. It successfully saved it, so we can go in now and see about loading it or deleting it or exporting it. If I look at loading, you'll see that test 1 now is there as a profile. I can select it to load that information. This is especially handy if you have multiple configurations for possibly multiple SIMs or multiple locations, maybe one setup for your mobile, whereas you have another setup specifically configured for a static location. And you can load these at will now without having to go through each and every setting to change each and every little thing. You can do this for this function, or If I go back, I see that there's an export, and I can export this particular configuration, option number 1, and it's going to be exported as a .igp file. We say, yes, I want to export this. And this way you can take that file and load it onto a different InvisaGig or save it as a backup, factory reset this one, which wipes everything, including those profiles, and then you can import it back in and then set it up without having to go back through all of the settings again. In this particular case, it makes a special file for that. It's just a link. You click on it, and then your browser, whichever it is, should allow you to just save it directly to your system. Some browsers like Brave have a special setting that you need to turn on to allow it. This is on our forum. We have a knowledge base article on how to do that. It's very simple and straightforward. In this case, I'm using Firefox, and it allows it directly. And I can say, yes, I want to save this file. It will then put it in the downloads folder that is for my computer and Firefox. And then I can open up the folder and see it there. Now, once you're done, you can just simply hit enter to return. Now, let's say I want to import one of those files. Pretty simple process. Hit 5 to import. It'll tell you some stuff of what you want to do. Hit enter to proceed. And if you run into an issue, like this says, not a valid file right away, it could potentially be your browser type. In this case, my Firefox is having an issue. So what I'll do is I'll actually go down and I'll just simply open up Chrome. In Chrome, it'll say, do you want to take over this session? I say, yeah. Take over the session, go into connection configuration, user profiles, and import. And then now you can see this particular browser doesn't have a problem with it. So in some cases, if you see an error for file upload and download, it may just be your particular browser's configuration. And in a lot of cases, instead of trying to figure out how to change the settings in your browser, it may just be easier to change browsers. So in this case, I'll go to my downloads, and we'll see here, there's my file, and I can upload it if I want. Or, if I really want to be goofy, I'll just change the name of it to 1B. And then upload that file. And now we've successfully imported it. And if I go in and I say I want to load option 2, you'll see now there's 2 different profiles here, test 1 and test 1B. Once you do load that profile, let's say test 1, I want to load it. Say yes, and it's going to load and do all the settings, and your unit should take those settings in and reboot. Once complete, then you can get back into the system again. Once back on and updated, we'll log back in, and we'll go back into user profiles, and you'll see that we can also delete profiles. So I simply want to delete the one that I had. Say maybe you messed up and you say, oh, I don't want to do that. Hit no, and it'll take you back here. So let's go with, and notice that where it took us. You see in the breadcrumbs, we're still in the delete menu. So pay attention to where you are so that you don't accidentally delete a profile that you wanted to keep, stuff like that. So still want to delete the second one. I'll say, yes, that's what I want to do. And it's been deleted. And if we look under load, you can see I only have the one now. Go back. Now, menu option 4 in the connection configuration menu is carrier profiles. This one is effectively what we had before with setting up the connection configuration for different carriers. So this is some of our pre-made information here. And we've also added a link to contact us if you want us to add in future updates any other carrier profiles to make it simpler for you to set up one that we haven't gotten here. If you do have some special scenario, you can always go back to the menu option that says generic. And here it'll ask you the options to manually enter in a generic setup. We call it generic because it utilizes a generic profile on the back end of the modem so that you can set up whatever profile you like as far as the APN and the connection type, whether it be IPv4, IPv6, or dual stack IPv4, IPv6. I'm going to go back. Local IP and multiple modem setup. We've gone over this before, but this is if you want to use multiple InvisaGigs on a single routing system for like load balancing and failover and bonding. They each need to have unique IP addresses on a single system like that, so that you can do that. It is also where you're going to be able to turn on or off IP pass-through or bridge mode. On the InvisaGig, by default, IP pass-through / bridge mode is enabled by default. It's automatic. If you want to turn that off, or you have a special scenario where you want to enter in the MAC address of which to apply the IP pass-through address, then you can enter it here as well. The next one is a new feature that we've added, and that is Tailscale. Tailscale implementation has been added to the InvisaGig for convenience for accessing your InvisaGig remotely so that you don't have to be on site physically to access your InvisaGig and see what's going on with it. We're also adding some pretty neat features to be able to utilize that interface for some other stuff as well. So currently this unit does not have Tailscale configured. I can add it, I can say yes, no, and so forth. And then you can go forth on all the settings there. I'm actually going to create a separate tutorial on how to set all that up, but this is where you will add your Tailscale interface. Enabled bands is the next spot here, and this is your band locking. So in general, band locking, though it's titled locking, is more of a filter. It's a list of the bands that you want to allow the modem to be able to use if it can access it on the cell tower. So it's a list, it's an allow list of what you want to say the modem is allowed to use. You remove the bands if you don't want the modem to ever be allowed to use that particular band. And our options are LTE bands, 5G non-standalone bands, which are aggregates as a secondary to LTE, or 5G standalone bands, which stand by themselves, no connection to LTE. And of course, we have the reset all defaults, so it puts all the bands back into defaults. I'll also make a tutorial specific for just this feature. Going back, and then we can go back, and then we can exit to the main menu. So next on the menu is InvisaGig Update Check. And on here, there's not really anything different about this. We've gone through this before. You run the update check. We did this at the very beginning of the video. But one small change in this new update is when the next update comes out, anytime there's another update, whenever your InvisaGig goes online, it does a check to see if there's an update automatically, and that's it. It just checks, pings the server to make sure, or check to see if there's a new version available. And if there is, it stops there, and it will actually highlight menu option 5 in green. And this is just to remind users, some users who don't sign up for email lists from us or check on the YouTube videos or just forget to even check on here. That gives you a way to say like, hey, bing, there's an update available for you. And that's all it does. It doesn't force the update. It doesn't download anything. It does nothing but simply check to see if one is available for you. And it only does it pretty much right up front. It doesn't constantly do this. So you should see a change in that in the future when there's another update available after this one. You have to have 1.0.12 before it will actually do that, of course. Next, text messages. This only applies to certain SIM plans. The next one is a watchdog and scheduled restart. I'll jump into this menu. We've got two different setups here. One is the connection watchdog itself, an intelligent online connection monitor that makes sure that you're staying online. And typically these things are not enabled by default, but the connection watchdog itself will get enabled if you do the cell tower lock or cell scan and lock. And that's because there's a scenario where if you lock to a specific cell on a specific cell tower, there is a chance that something could get locked up in that if something happens to that cell while connected, that cell or that tower goes down. There's a scenario where that could have a problem of getting reconnected. And so the watchdog wants to make sure that that doesn't happen and checks for any kind of disconnect there. So if you didn't have the watchdog, you potentially would get disconnected and stay offline. And in that case, the watchdog is necessary. Otherwise, if you don't want the watchdog running at all and you don't have a cell tower lock, then it won't be on by default. And then the scheduled restart, in some cases, for some people at different locations on different plans, it is beneficial to just have the modem be rebooted, basically like manually rebooting it, but on an automated schedule at intervals that you determine necessary. Visual accessibility, menu option 8 in this version, is new to the update. And this is where we added a spot or a home in the menu for dark mode. In my case, it's disabled, but you can enable it if you like. And there's also the new option for large text mode. If you do this, basically what it'll do is it'll make it a little easier for people to read. They need to see a little bit larger text, and the text is a little bit compressed, so it'll separate it out a little bit. Now, I'll say, yeah, I want to do that. Actually, sorry, you don't just hit enter to continue. It will reset up the interface, and you'll have to reconnect to it to see it. And you'll see here that the text is a little bigger. Log back in. And now you'll see the text is not only a little bigger, but it's also separated. We'll jump back to the main menu to see this. So if I scroll and see the whole menu, it actually takes up more than the whole page now. And the text size is a little bigger, your spacing is a little more, and it just makes it a little bit easier to read all the info. And this bleeds into every single page. So if I wanted to see my modem info, I'll actually do the log off version of it. You'll see this is persistent. So if I'll look at my modem info, it'll gather the information like normal. Menu, everything is in this larger text, much easier to see for a lot of people. Now, this output is larger, but the spacing is only double spaced on menus, not on these outputs. So you still have a little bit of congestion there for the visual, but on most browsers, even if the text isn't clear enough to see, of course, you can always zoom your own screen however you need to. In the case where you may need this type of visual accessibility, you probably already have most of those settings set up. So it's just a convenience thing to have it to where most people can see a little bit better. All right, so if I log back in and we go back to visual accessibility, I can turn this off as well. And it's just a simple toggle. You don't have to say whether you want it yes or no or anything like that. If you select it, it'll toggle it. And you just hit enter to continue. Or if you don't want to do that, hit B for back. Once again, we come back in. We'll see we're back to normal. Next is a new addition to the update, a setup wizard. So this is obviously most beneficial to new customers who come along and get an InvisaGig and start to get set up. The setup wizard is a step-by-step question and answer guided setup. And so instead of having to look at tutorials or look up the setup guide or the quick setup guide, you can effectively jump right into the InvisaGig menu, jump straight to the setup wizard, and then answer questions, yes, no, or fill in information where needed. And I'll actually have a specific video just for the setup wizard, but this has been added here for not only new users, of course, but also those who want to restart or reset up their InvisaGig or go back through and change it for a new SIM card or carrier or anything like that. It just makes the whole setup process faster. And conveniently at the end, you can even save that setup as a profile, which you can save, download, upload, or import, export, and utilize that as a new configuration. So maybe you're already using your InvisaGig and you've got it set up on a particular carrier and SIM plan, and you're about to add a second one. You want to get a new one in. Instead of completely rewriting or overwriting all of your settings, you can save that to configuration and then go to the setup wizard and save a second configuration, maybe an AT&T configuration and a Verizon configuration. And then you can load those configurations completely. If maybe you wanted to have one that's in dark mode and has a different watchdog setting, as well as a reboot schedule on, say, a Verizon SIM. And then on your AT&T, you don't want the watchdog and you don't need the reboot schedule, and you only want to have a certain setting set. So you can actually do that with the setup wizard to make it faster, and then back through to the configuration profiles to swap much easier. I'm actually going to exit here. And then, of course, we have reboot and the convenience of log off. And that's it. The new update, version 1.0.12, has been live for a little bit now. If you're seeing this video, it's definitely live already. And I believe that we've followed through on a lot of our promises with adding things and making things simpler for the users. And for all of the new users out there, or potential customers and users out there, we hope that you have enjoyed the video and you see how simple, super simple, the InvisaGig is. Hopefully we can get it in your hands, get it set up, get you online, keep you online with a crazy fast internet connection that was super simple to set up. This has been Richard for InvisaGig. Take care.